dear learners, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will be talking about types of application context. So in our previous video, we had spoken about application context in detail, wherein we had seen what exactly is application context. We had also spoken about what is bean factory, how is bean factory and application context same or different from each other. Also, we had spoken about that there are three primary implementation classes. One is class path XML application context, file system XML application context, and annotation config application context. Right? So we had spoken about these different classes. In today's video, we will be talking in detail about these different types of application context. So let's get started. So in this particular diagram, you can see that we had spoken about this hierarchy in our previous video. If you've not seen my previous video, you can check that out here. So we had seen that bean factory was the interface, correct? And there was implementation class of bean factory, that is XML bean factory. And there was one interface, application context, which was inheriting the bean factory interface. This bean factory interface was further implemented by three different classes, that is class path XML application context, file system application context, and annotation config application context. This is what we had seen previously. To this, we are further seeing that with the arrival of Spring 3.0, there were newer classes and interfaces that were introduced. That is, we had web application context interface being introduced, and its two implementation classes, that is annotation config web application context and XML web application context. So we will be talking about the whole web application context and its implementations when we talk about Spring MVC, right? That is when we'll see what exactly these application context classes are, how can you use them in your code, and how can you implement them in your code, right? Our today's focus is primarily going to be on these three: class path XML application context, file system XML application context, and annotation config application context. So let's understand one by one how they are implemented. So class path XML application context, if you remember, we have already seen in our previous video also. So our focus is going to be on the other two. So we had seen that for the class path XML application context, you need to create an object of application context and pass it the object of class path XML application context, and to this particular constructor, you need to pass the name of your configuration file. Now there was a very important thing that we had to remember here, that this particular XML file has to be in your class path. It has to be in some resource folder of your project. That is why we had kept it in the resources folder of our project, if you remember from our previous video. And after that, using that application context object, we were calling the getBean method, which was providing us with the car object, which was further calling the car details method and showing us the various details of the car. Correct? So this was class path XML application context. This is usually used in situations when your configuration file is on your build path. Correct? I repeat, class path XML application context is used in situations when your configuration file is on your build path. Okay. Now, in case if your XML file is not on your build path, or maybe it is located on some server and you can access it through some URL or something, that is when you can use the file system XML application context. This is used in situations when you want to access the file from the file system, okay, or maybe you want to access it from some URL. So as you can see in this example, I'm saying string path, and I'm giving the whole path of my XML application context file, where exactly it is located. Now currently I have given the same path where it is in my project itself, but this could be somewhere else also. It could be in some other folder, some common shared folder from where you are going to access it. So this is the path that I have. Then I'll be using this particular path variable in the constructor of file system XML application context. Correct? So I'll be passing that here and using the AC object that I have, the application context object, to call the getBean method to obtain the car object and further call the car details method. Correct? So this is file system XML application context, used in situations when you want to access the configuration file either from your file system or from some URL. Third that we were talking about was annotation config application context. Now in the previous two cases we were assuming that the configuration file is an XML file, and that XML file we were retrieving either from our build path, that is our resources folder, or from some other location, some other file location. So here the configuration was done inside an XML file. The third example, that is the annotation config application context, here you do not have an XML file. So here the configuration is not done through an XML file, it is done through the configuration class. So here I have my application or app config class, which I'll be using to configure my objects. You can see I have this app config class which has the configuration annotation, and you can see there are two methods. One is tire, which is returning the object of my MRF tires, and you can see it has a bean annotation. This tells us that this particular method is a bean configuration method, and it is going to return us a bean object. Similarly, here I have a car method which creates the car object, sets the tire into it, and returns the car object back. And for using this particular app config class, I am saying what? I am saying application context. Context equals to new annotation config application context app config dot class. So here basically, rather than providing the name of the XML file, I am providing the name of the configuration class. I repeat, here rather than providing the name of the XML file, the XML configuration file, I am providing the name of the configuration class, and the rest is the same thing. You use the context object, the application context object, to call the getBean method to obtain the object of the car and use it in your code. Correct? So this is going to be the same here. So these are our three examples that we were talking about: the class path XML application context, file system XML application context, and annotation config application context. So now let's go ahead and try to see an example on all three of them and see how they work. So let's get to Eclipse and start writing the code for it. So what I'll be doing is, here in Eclipse, I'll be creating a new class. I'll say a new class, and I'll say class path XML application context test. Okay, is what I'll say, and I'll make this as a, it'll have a main. So I'll create three different classes here, and I'll show you the examples. Okay, so we will say application context. So if you remember from our previous videos, where we had already created this car class, I had already created the MRF tire class, which implements the tire interface, which has the show tire type method. So this was already done. If you've not seen my previous videos, you can check out my whole playlist here, and you can see my previous videos to understand what exactly this example is. So here in this class path XML, class path XML application context test class, what we'll say application context AC is equals to new class path XML application context. Correct? And here we will provide the name of the file. So we will say application context dot XML. Okay, just make sure you're giving the correct name. So we'll just quickly check in src main resources. So yeah, the name is correct, and then we say a semicolon, and then we say AC dot you can say getBean, and we can provide the name as car. Correct? And you can say car is equals to, you typecast it to type car, and you say AC dot getBean. So I'll import the car class, and then finally we can say car dot car details. Then we can try and run this. So let's just save and try to run this. So I have got tubed. What I will do here is, I will go to the XML file that we have. Correct? Let me just put it here, and let me just change this value, or rather let me create one more object of tire here. I'll say tire 1, and I'll say this is, maybe this is tubeless. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll create one more car object also here, or a car bean tag also. I'll say car 1, and I'll say this is going to refer to tire 1 and not tire. Okay, so this is how I want it. So car class, the name is tire, and it's supposed to refer to tire 1, that is this one. And yeah, so I think this should work. Let's see. So what we'll do is we will create one more class. So as I showed you the first example, this we've already done previously also, so I don't see any complications as such here. It is a simple code. It refers to the XML file on the build path. Now what I'll do is I'll right click again, and I'll create one more class with a main in it, and this is going to be file system XML AC test. So I'll create one more class, and I'll say finish. This is also going to contain main, and what we'll say is we'll say application context, okay, AC is equals to new file system application context, file system XML application context, and we need to provide it a path. So what we'll do is we'll create a path variable. Okay, so we'll say string path is equals to, and we'll have to copy the path. So you can see this is the path where it is located. So I'll copy the path, and I'll have to change the slash either to this one, or I'll have to change it to double slash. Okay, like this. So what I'll do is I'll change the slash to a forward slash, right? So this is what I'm going to do here. Put this whole thing in double quotes and a semicolon. Correct? So this is going to be my path. So this is where it will go and refer it to. Then what do we do is we say AC dot get bean. Okay, and we say car 1 here, car 1, and we put a semicolon, and we say car is equals to, you typecast it to type car, and we say car dot car details. We need to also import the car class, but I think it is already imported. Okay, so this is the second example. Let's quickly try to run this and see how it works. So this is giving us an error. Okay, what does it have to say? Okay, yeah, I did not mention the file name. Sorry, my bad. We need to say application context dot XML. Okay. So I'll just save this code and try to rerun this. I'm absolutely sorry about that. And you can see it is referring to the other object that says tubeless. Correct. So it is calling the other object here. So this is the second way of doing it. We'll quickly now create a configuration class. So I'll say new class, and we'll say app-config. Okay, this will not contain main. This will rather contain annotation called as @configuration. Correct, and this will then have two methods. So let's just take it from our PPT. So we'll just quickly copy these, and I'll make a few changes because we will not be able to use it as it is. So I'll import the bean, of course. Okay, and I will, rather than directly returning this, so okay, let me just try to format this. So I'll go to source and I'll say format. So this is done. What we can say here, rather than this, is we can say mrf tires is mrf tires. Let's say mr is equals to new mrf tires. You could then say mr dot set type, and maybe I'll say tubed here in a different way. Okay, and then I'll say return mr, the object that I have, and then here the car class is calling the tire method, which will return us that object, and the tire will get set here. Correct. So this is how our configuration will happen. So what we did here, I'll just quickly recap it for you. So what are we doing here is that we created an app config class, okay, with a configuration annotation on it. Then we created two methods here, a tire method and a car method, wherein the tire method was creating an object of MRF tires, setting the type to tube and returning MR, and this had a bean annotation to tell that the method is a bean configuration method. Similarly, we created this car method, which was creating a car object, setting the tire using the set tire method and returning the car object. And here also we had the bean configuration annotation. Correct? So this is what we did. Now let's try and create another class. We'll say new class, and what will we say here? We will say this is going to be what do you call it? This is going to be annotation config, annotation config, application context test. Okay, and this one will also contain main, and we say finish. So what do we write here now? We say application context, application context. Let's import AC is equals to new app, new annotation config, application context, and we take this particular one which takes class, and we will say app config that we had created, the app config dot class is what we provide here, and then we say semicolon. Once this is done, we will say AC dot get bean. Now the question should be, what do we provide here, right? For the earlier two examples, for this one car one, and for the other example we said car, because that is what we had defined here in the XML file, car one and car. But here we have not defined anything, correct? So what we usually pass is basically this particular method name. Like right now it is car, so I'll say car, and I'll say car is equals to, you typecast it to type car, and you import the car class, and you say car dot car details. So this should work. Let's try to run this and see. So you can see it is showing me tubed that we had passed here, correct? You can see here. Now let me just show you, let me just change this to car obj. Okay, I'm just changing this to car obj just to show you that it is referring to that particular method name. And if I run this code as it is now, this was I'm passing car here, so it is expecting a method with name car in the app config class, but because it will not find, it will throw an exception. So if you can see here, it says no such bean definition exception. So it is not able to find the bean named car. So if I change this to car obj, the way it has been named here, car obj, correct? So if I change this to that and try to run, it should work. You can see it is again coming correctly, right? So this is an example for all the three implementations of application context, the class path XML application context, which we've seen in example quite some times now. Then the file system, wherein you use it in cases when you want to read a file from the file system and pass it here as a path, correct? And thirdly, the annotation config application context, wherein now I am not using an XML file for configuration, rather I have a configuration class which generates the objects and gives me, and I'm basically using that configuration class in my code to use the to get the object basically of the car class, right? So that is it for today. In case you like my content, please like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel so that you always get notifications for any new video that comes up. Share it with your family and friends, and please comment on my videos based on your, you can give your feedback, you can put up some questions that you want, or you can just message anything else also that you like. So that is it for today. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a nice week ahead.